All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to week 2 of your regularly scheduled programming. Today, we get to have a conversation at its core about something we know all about and at the same time know virtually nothing about. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation surrounding the Learn Unit and hopefully walking away with a much deeper understanding of what this tool is, why it is so important, how it relates to tactics as a whole, why do we start off with this, so on and so forth. All right. Before I start on that, there are a couple of questions already posed. I want to touch base on mentors and mentoring for a second, and then answer any other questions that we have. Okay, so let's start with Taylor's question. Yeah, so that's fine, Taylor. If you had taken that pretest before, just go ahead and submit it with the earlier date. That's totally fine. As with last semester, screenshots are totally fine. On PCs, I think when you do a screenshot, you get like the whole screen. On Macs, it's a little bit easier to select the area that you want to screenshot. Either one is fine. What I ask of you is that you just open it up really quick. But before you submit the screenshot, open it up and just make sure it's legible. And as long as that's there, we can work with that. If I do have questions, I'll either reach out to you or I'll comment and just make sure to respond to those comment sections, or I can always go into your accounts and check from there. Okay. Any questions about BDS? Okay, cool. Mentoring. So I met with the mentors last night for the first time. I will have your mentor pairings by the end of the week. I will be emailing you and your mentor at the same time. It was actually really cool. At the end of the class, we talked just a little bit about like what we were excited about content-wise in the class, and about half the people said they were excited about the mentoring opportunity. So I think that you guys, I know that you guys have a good group of people who to teach you, but people who are also just excited about being mentors, which is, if nothing else, a good place to be starting from. I can't emphasize enough how important it's going to be for you to stay in communication with your mentors, for you and your mentors to stay in communication with us, keeping in mind that those mentors are supporting you in both this class and Dr. Cohen's class. So I'm involved, Dr. G's involved, Dr. Cohen's involved, you're involved, your mentors are involved. Like, there's just a lot of support available to you guys through this process, and I want to make sure that everyone is taking advantage of that to the full. So really don't look at the mentorship opportunity as something that has to be done, but it is the thing to be done. Like that is your first Learn Unit. That is your first line of defense. That is your first learning opportunity. And I really want to make sure that you guys are not just using it, but comfortable and confident in that process. And that way, when you guys are mentors next year, you will feel good about where you are there. Okay, sound good? So those pairings will be coming by the end of this week. Your research summary 1 for this class should go to your mentors. Okay, remember, you are not graded on timeliness in terms of getting those assignments back into our modules, the week 2 due date, so to speak, is to get it to your mentor. All right. So it doesn't have to be turned into your mentor, gotten feedback, turned around, and turned in by the end of week 2. Research summary 1 has to be turned into your mentor by week 2. And then you go back and forth with your mentor, and then you'll turn it in. Okay. Sound good? Awesome. I'm going to try really, really hard not to lose my voice this semester. So make sure I'm always drinking some water while I'm yelling at Zoom. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
So after our mentor gives us feedback and we correct or fix whatever they gave us feedback on, do you want us to resubmit it to them before we turn it in? Or
no,
I was doing it last semester. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So just to review, because it's very much worth reviewing, the process is you turn in, you do your quiz, your research summary, your data collection, whatever it is. You turn it in to your mentor. Your mentor, I've instructed them to write their name and the date that the assignment was received in their mentor color at the top of your project. So make sure that you email it to them in Word format, not PDF, okay? They will then give you their feedback below each question in a different color. And then depending on how intensive that feedback is, you can either edit your own work within your primary text in a third color, or if it's easier, just go ahead and rewrite your response. Don't just copy and paste their response. Use your language plus their language to make your response. Really, really, really omit that correction, okay? Understand that what we are grading largely when we grade these quizzes, when we grade these research summaries that are coming back from your mentors, is your ability to have incorporated their feedback. We are working with the mentors to make sure that the feedback that they are giving you is accurate, right? And then we are looking to ensure that you are getting the learn unit, right? That is not to say that there are going to be times where your mentor gives you inaccurate feedback, and that's okay. That's okay. When that happens, we will work with both you and your mentor to make sure that you are both on the same page, all right? If you get something back that you are unsure about, reach out to your mentor first and say, hey, I'm really unsure about this. This is where I saw this in DTS. This is how I understood this. This is where I got this from. That conversation should happen with your mentors first. Don't come to us and say, Dr. Shannon, Dr. G, my mentor is wrong. It could be that your mentor is wrong. That's fine. That does happen. But don't come tattling to us first. Work with them to gain a deeper understanding. If you're not sure, then say you're not sure in your paper. And we see those things. Okay? Sound good? Any questions there? It's a challenging relationship between adults to have when you have that mentor-mentee relationship. But as long as you are respectful, as long as they are respectful, and as long as you are working with them, it will be positive. I promise you that. All right. Cool. Any mentoring questions? Taylor, it's going to be the same mentor for both classes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Any other mentoring questions? Process, logistics, expectations, anything?
Oh, I was just looking at like research summary analysis 1, and I haven't gotten to look through all of them, but last semester y'all kind of just let us go find kind of what we thought might be applicable to what we were working on.
Yep.
Are y'all mainly assign them this semester, or are we gonna?
No, it's going to be largely the same. There's going to be an article here and there that we want to make sure that you have read and that you are reading. What I would be thinking about now is what you are thinking about doing for data collections. I would start, research summary, maybe not 1, but 2, 3, and 4 might be on one topic that you end up using for a data collection. And then 5, 6, and 7 would be for your next data collection. It doesn't have to be that way, but there's definitely benefit to that. Okay. Cool. Good question. Good question.
I'm trying to wrap my mind around the timing of doing assignments and giving them to mentors and getting back to submit. I'm still a bit confused, but I'm also very used to like, this is the deadline, have it in, and that's it. So
yeah. So look at the weekly deadlines as your deadline to get it to your mentor. All right. We kind of batch grade things, as you guys are very aware. Nothing will happen for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you'll get like 5 grades all at once. The reason that we have some level of confidence in doing that is because we are trusting to some degree that you've already gotten the Learn Unit from your mentor. Your grade is not the final arbiter of your learning. Your feedback from your mentor is the arbiter of your learning. Okay. Now, yes, once a semester, twice a semester, a mentor gives feedback that I don't like, and you go and you run with that for the next 5 projects, and you get a couple of points taken off consistently. We can work with stuff like that. I'm not overly concerned about things like that. That's not going to make or break anyone's grade. Okay. Okay. So the assignment due date is the date it is due to your mentor. Your mentors should be getting your work back to you within about a week, keeping in mind that they have a whole ton of stuff on their plate as well. So be patient with them, but have an expectation for them, right? So it should take them no more than a week or so to get it back to you, make your changes, turn it in. Okay. Cool. Any other questions?
I have another one.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
For our data collections, are you and Dr. Shaman gonna meet with us to discuss potential data collections or like which direction to go based on who our students are?
So no, we aren't. That doesn't mean we can't. That really is like a good way to utilize office hours. That's like the perfect thing to talk about and during that time. And for you guys, office hours is like, hey, I need to meet. When can we make that happen? Right. Those decisions should largely be with your on-site supervisors. All right. Based on the needs of your clients. You guys know your clients better than we know your clients. Your supervisors know, for the most part, what the expectations are. If you are not in a CAVAS setting or in a clinical setting, if you're in a school setting, which I know some of you are, and you need that additional support because you don't have like ready BCBA access, then yeah, set up a meeting and we'll have that conversation with you.
So our data collection project it's in the all 3 of them this semester will be in the same format as the one that we did last semester, right?
Yeah, they will. That being said, we'll probably wait until next week to really go over it. But we'll I really felt like the data collections were the data collection was an afterthought last semester. And I want to make sure structure-wise that you guys have confidence in how you are building it. Everyone always asks, can I get not everyone, every year we get the question, can I get a model of what the data collection should look like? The answer is the articles that you are reading for your research summaries and for your lit reviews. Those are your models. So if you have questions about how to structure your data collection, that is your model. Okay. If
And
you
the samples that Dr. Gautreaux and you showed us when we were doing them last semester were really helpful too from previous semesters.
Good. I'm glad. And I gave a little bit more of a look through on APA, the APA manual 7th edition over the break. And there's actually a whole separate set of guidelines. They're not massively different, but they are different for student manuscripts. So that is yet another resource that you have. And that would be the right thing to follow. Okay. Cool. Does everyone have the APA manual? Okay. If you don't, or if you're listening to this later and you don't, the Purdue OWL website, Purdue like Purdue University, OWL like hoot hoot the bird owl, has that is like the online resource for style manuals. It is accurate. It is reliable. It is a valid resource for you guys to use. Okay.
I was gonna ask, I don't know if I missed this. Are we doing the 6th or 7th edition in this class?
7th.
7th, okay.
7th.
And
I spoke with Dr. Cohane. She was accepting 6th or 7th last semester, I believe. She asked me, I said I want 7th. She said, okay, I'll do 7th. So that should be the same for her class as well.
She had mentioned that last class.
Okay.
That she was doing the full switch to 7th.
Good. And in terms of like citation, I don't think there's major differences. Manuscript style, there are significant differences, and that student manuscript is a really helpful piece. Okay, good questions. Good questions.
I have a quick question about the DPS quizzes. I was just looking ahead. Is that something downloadable that we fill out, or are we going to need to be prepped in the moment to complete it when we click?
No. If you can complete that in a timed fashion, then you are a smarter man than I. They are downloadable. They are big. They are challenging. Okay. Prepare yourself now. They are open book. You can use resources for those. But they are the real thing. Okay?
I just want to click that link without being prepared, and then I have to have it done in.
No. Yeah, it's not a timed quiz. Good question.
Like the quiz that like in Dr. Cohane's class, like her quizzes, it's like a Word document.
Yep, exactly. Okay. You good? Any other questions? These are all really, really good process questions. Okay, cool. Here's what we are going to do. We are going to I am going to use the breakout room function for Zoom. I'm going to send you into groups of 3 or 4. And your question, as a group, I want you guys to write down, as just kind of like word vomit, what comes to mind when you're thinking of Learn Unit. I want you're basically going to, as a group, come up with your baseline for your understanding of the Learn Unit. Okay? I know that's a nebulous question. That's okay. I want you guys to come up with what that means for you. All right? Sound good? Okay. 11 participants into 3 rooms. Go. Okay. Who wants to go first?
We can
Go ahead.
get it over with. So our understanding of a LEARN unit was we all had pretty similar ideas, and y'all feel free to chime in too if I forget something. But basically, there's an antecedent, the response, and a consequence. And one thing that we all talked about and that I saw that was emphasized a lot in DTS was student-teacher interactions. There has to be student-teacher interactions. And one thing that we also talked about for a little bit too is, when you first start teaching a LEARN unit, you're gonna, or a program, you might start out with a lot of LEARN units. And then as, the child builds that repertoire and starts becoming more independent, the number of LEARN units decreases. So it'll probably, the number of LEARN units would vary depending on the kid and their abilities.
Excellent. Very nice. Very nice. Good.
And then going with that student teacher interaction, we had talked about how just like for the student, we typically elicit the antecedent. If I feel like we're saying we're running a program, for example, we give the antecedent, they elicit the behavior, we give the consequence procedure. During that, their behavior is an antecedent for us. And then
Good.
our behavior becomes the consequence procedure. So there's a two-part, there's LEARN unit on the teacher part as well as the student.
Excellent. Excellent. Very, very nice.
We did also go into discussion, a big discussion about what is the difference between a discrete trial versus the LEARN unit.
All right. And we'll talk about that. I'm not going to answer that just yet, but good. All right. Who's next?
We said pretty much the same thing, the 3-term contingency and with antecedent, response, and consequence. We also said, or Shelby said about having a measurable response to the antecedent.
Okay. Good. I like that. I like that. Measurable response to the antecedent. Okay. Is that ever not true? Yeah, I don't think so either.
That part I'm not sure.
I think that is a critical variable to a LEARN unit, is having a response that is measurable in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Group 3, what did you guys think?
Okay, ours was pretty much very similar to that. We also, on top of the 3-term contingency, we talked about motivating and establishing operations being there in order to tie all 3 components together for a LEARN unit. And then we talked about how the consequence could be between reinforcement or correction, and there's multiple types of correction and reinforcement procedures. So it could be a wide variety of things.
Good. Awesome. Okay. So there's obviously a lot of similarity in what you guys are talking about. And what I really like, one is that it's great to see that you are all kind of heading in the right direction. And you all, I think in this circular kind of way, expanded on each other's responses, but encompassed. Did anyone, whether you discussed it in your group or not, did anything major that you wanted to add to that get left out? Based of all the things that were just said, is there anything that is like fundamental to your understanding of the LEARN unit that was not said? It's fine if it's not, but go ahead, Heather.
I think a big component that we mess up on a lot, I know in clinic, is natural reinforcement. Just tying in that component of the correction procedure and the reinforcement to natural consequence. I don't know. It's just a piece that I don't think we get enough training on and understanding on. Okay,
good. And I like that you're keying in on a nuance within the kind of the paradigm that's been described, right? what you guys are showing me right now is that you have an understanding of what you've been taught so far as it relates to the learning. Like, but you have a narrow understanding of the learning unit right now, but it is a good understanding of what you've been told and what you've read, and that's great. What the next hour is going to be is beginning to expand that understanding. Okay, so that was a really good baseline measure of our understanding of the learning unit. So let's start with Taylor's question. I think it was Taylor's question of learning unit versus discrete trial, right? So there's overlap between the two, but they are very much not the same things. So a discrete trial is this well-defined operant, right? A discrete trial training takes multiple well-defined operands and teaches them in systematic ways such that that operant becomes more well-defined. I have consistent antecedents. I have consistent behaviors that I'm looking for. I have a consistent, hopefully, consequence, whether that's reinforcement or correction, to those responses. And then it stops. And that's what I look at. I do that repeatedly, and through that process, I have discrete trial training. Okay? Let's break down antecedent behavior and consequence there. So first of all, understand that I've just described discrete trial training through antecedent behavior and antecedent behavior consequence relationship. And I've put a box around that. All right? That's important. It's more than a 3-term contingency because there's this systematic continual training, but it is multiple 3-term contingencies. All right? For a particular operand. Antecedent. Let's look at the antecedent in a discrete trial. What is the antecedent going to be? Is it going to be scripted or is it going to be generalized? What do you guys think?
Scripted?
Yeah, exactly, right? So you're going to have a very clear antecedent that is going to be consistent time after time after time. That is conceptually sound, right? I don't want you to hear my voice and think that I'm putting this negative connotation on that. That is conceptually sound. It's not the only conceptually sound way to teach, but it is conceptually sound. Behavior. What's the behavior going to look like? Is it going to be well-defined? Is it going to be more general? Is it going to have variations available to it? What is the behavior going to look like in discrete trial training?
I would think they'd be looking for a well-defined behavior.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, exactly. So you have a well-defined scripted antecedent. You have a narrowly defined behavior. Now we have the consequence. Let's start with reinforcement. What is reinforcement going to look like?
It can be tangible,
Okay.
or it can be verbal praise.
Okay. Yeah.
Natural.
Okay.
I would think once again, we'd be looking at something specific and defined.
Okay, good. So that's what I was looking,
Inconsistent.
that's what I was looking for, to see if any of you were going to say that. So we had this scripted, well-defined antecedent. We had this scripted, well-defined behavior. Now for the reinforcer, is it the scripted, well-defined reinforcer, or is it more open? That's an important question.
It is scripted. It's scripted.
And it should be consistent.
Okay. So in discrete trial training, it's more likely going to be a combination of those two. You are going to be, in discrete trial training, you are going to be conducting somewhat regular preference assessments, which is your openness, and you are only going to be selecting reinforcers from that preference assessment, which is the scripted aspect. All right, does that make sense?
So like a kid wouldn't be able to change reinforcers? Like if they say they're working for something out of the preference assessment and then change their mind, they couldn't change their mind essentially?
Probably not. It depends on line technician, depends on the BCBA. But if a kid changes their mind in the middle of a session to something that's not on the preference assessment, then you do not have data to show that that stimulus actually functions as a reinforcer. You have the kid's vocal behavior, which is indicative of functioning as a reinforcer, but you do not have data that shows that it has functioned as a reinforcer. All right, and that's gonna, I can already tell that that's running counter to what you are thinking of as high quality reinforcement. All right, so let's come back to that. What about the correction procedure? What is that going to look like in discrete trial training? Scripted, more open, depends.
Scripted?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you are going to have overall a very highly scripted operant that's taught systematically that I would argue is not going to, with a high probability, lead to generalization at the good end of things. At the bad end of things, I would argue that you cannot, through discrete trial training, you cannot reliably predict learning.
It seems very unnatural compared to how we approach things with the Learn unit.
Okay.
In like at our clinic, for example, there are some scripts we may have to follow, but we're using those, say, academics to place demands and elicit the behaviors in a more natural function compared to every single thing being scripted. Okay,
good. And let's hold off on that for a second, because I'm going to go back and we're going to do the exact same thing for the Learn unit. And I just don't want to put the cart before the horse, but that is definitely the direction that we are headed. Okay. There's one other piece that's, I think, critical to the concept of the discrete trial. All right. The discrete trial, the targeted behavior is an operant. Okay. Anything that can be maintained or increased through reinforcement. Why does that set the discrete trial apart from the Learn unit?
Sometimes on Learn unit, we're trying to decrease the behavior versus you said they're maintaining or increase. No, not quite.
Yeah. So, okay. So yes, that's right. And maybe I misspoke a little bit. So you could have, you could definitely, we're focusing on reinforcement, but yes, in the discrete trial, you could also have punishing consequences that function the same way. So that's, I misspoke there, but good pickup. Good pickup. So what else?
Well, I don't know. My understanding, when I think of discrete trial training, it's or typically with nonverbal students, or we're versus maybe, yeah, or less verbal than.
I think that's more correlational than anything. I wouldn't look at that as a critical variable in terms of the use of discrete trial.
You're saying the behavior is an operant. Can you explain that a little better?
Yes. Yes. So you have a behavior that is selected through its consequences. All right. So it's the presence of the reinforcer simultaneous with the antecedent teaches the child that given the antecedent, you have access to reinforcement.
So the behavior is only present under certain circumstances?
Yeah. That's what I mean by the operant.
Okay.
Okay.
That's kind of why I thought that the consequence and the corrections were so scripted, because they are guiding the behavior.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
So
and
how
that's why it is
does a
conceptual
kid
with sound.
generalize?
Say that again.
So how do you generalize if you're only eliciting that behavior under certain circumstances?
So you are both correct. And that's why I said that I find that to be a limitation of discrete trial training. But you have, given an antecedent, you have a behavior and or behavior variation. Certain behaviors elicit certain consequences. Those behaviors that elicit reinforcing consequences are selected and are now emitted again in the presence of future antecedents. So the consequence selects the behavior. All right, the antecedent signals that reinforcement is available given a particular behavior. So that circle is your operant. Does that make sense, Heather? Lost your microphone.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. I think so. I'm trying to write notes and grasp it. I'm gonna review the meeting and then.
Yeah. So operant behavior is learning behavior, right? So respondent behavior is conditioning. Like that's what we typically think of there. Operant behavior, there's operant conditioning, but if we look at that as learning. Okay. So respondent is when the reinforcer is delivered simultaneous with the behavior, and that strengthens the behavior. The operant is when the reinforcer is delivered after the behavior, and that strengthens the behavior. Okay. All right. I'll say it. I'll go back to the original question because it's really important. So in discrete trial training, we talked about behaviors that are increased or maintained by a reinforcer.
Now that you've said this, I can really connect it to some of the things we do in education. A lot of the direct teaching programs that we use that are scripted or more discrete trials. Like for me, corrective reading's been a program we've used on and off, and it's very much based on that correction and that consequence and that building upon that and future behavior. So I can definitely see how that would be related.
Okay.
It seems like it's easier for memorization to occur.
Okay.
Well, I'm thinking, I feel like, and I'm not sure this is the right way to say this, but I feel like in discrete trial training, the reinforcer is actually leading which you probably said, but just in a different way. It's actually
you're accurate, but that's part of the whole operant paradigm. So I'm glad you're seeing that. It's not what I'm looking for, but that is absolutely at the core of what we're talking about here. You guys are overthinking it. And this is often the case with these types of questions. That's totally fine. the discrete trial says nothing about learning. In a discrete trial, we do not need, there's no requirement that we are focusing on untaught, previously untaught behaviors. And there is no requirement that the process leads to learning. One of the I don't want to say one of the hallmarks. For those who do not use discrete trials, one thing that we often notice right away when you look, one second, at discrete trial graphs is that the graphs look like that. Does that show anybody learning? Can you guys see my whiteboard right now? Is that what's on the screen right now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Does that look like learning to anybody?
No.
No, but that can be a graph that you see through discrete trial training. Has anyone seen that before? All right. If you see that graph in a setting that requires learn units, your response just by looking at that graph should be learn units were not in place. Learning is a requirement of learn units. That is hugely important. How many of you are in clinics or in schools where learn units are used and you've seen a graph like that? And your response when you see that should be learn units are not in place. I'm not saying that those graphs don't occur when we are in clinics and locations where learn units are utilized. What I am saying is that the learn unit provides, which we're about to talk about in detail, provides the paradigm, provides the tool, provides the tactic to problem solve that graph, whereas the discrete trial does not. The discrete trial is all about process. The learn unit is all about interaction. Okay? So now let's switch gears and let's talk about the learn unit. And I want you to think back, and this took me a long time to understand. So start thinking about it now and keep gnawing on it. The title of the chapter is The Learn Unit, a Natural Fracture of Teaching. All right, what does that mean? Does anyone have an idea of what natural fracture of teaching means?
Like the breakdown.
Expand. Come on, you're used to this, Tanya.
I mean, looking at the parts, are the parts being implemented effective, you know?
Okay. It's so what I think is beautiful about the learn unit is you have, yes, there are the different components of the learn unit. And yes, we can analyze each of them individually, but the unit of analysis is the learn unit. All right. And when we analyze things, we don't analyze number of antecedents. We don't analyze number of consequences. We analyze learn units. Okay. So what does natural fracture of teaching mean? Anyone know? And it's okay if you don't. It's okay if you don't. What the natural fracture of teaching means is the learn unit is, it's basically like the lowest common denominator. All right. It is the point, it is the last point, the lowest point, the most basic point where you can be sure that learning is occurring. All right. I'll put this in what I think are very clear terms. If you have antecedents, can you be sure that learning is occurring? No. If you have behavior, can you be sure that learning is occurring? No. If you have consequences, can you be sure that learning is occurring?
It depends.
Agree, disagree?
You need to have all three.
Okay. Now we're getting somewhere.
If you only have one, then you can't tell. If you have more than one, you'll be able to tell.
Okay, we're getting
Okay.
somewhere. So Heather, think about the question I asked. If you just have a consequence,
No.
right? Behavior, consequence. No, right? All right, so now we're getting somewhere. You have to have all three. But we just talked about discrete trials. Do discrete trials have an antecedent? Do they have a behavior? Do they have a consequence? Did we decide that discrete trials were predictive, necessarily predictive of learning? No, we just looked at the graphs that went up and down and up and down. We just looked at how the targets don't necessarily require learning, right? So it's not enough to say that the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence are in place. Let's loop back around to the beginning of the conversation when you guys came up with your baselines. And I believe it was Heather's group that talked about motivating operations. That's not an antecedent. It's not a behavior. That's not a consequence. Is a motivating operation a necessary component of learning? To be predictive of learning. Someone be bold. Yes or no?
I feel like it is because
I think it can be.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of the client I'm currently working with now, and if I don't have motivating establishing operations in place, presenting an antecedent in this situation is not going to create the behavior I'm looking for.
Good. Good.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing because we have a client, the line tech was telling me essentially, like most kids, iPad is the only reinforcer, sadly, but it was decided by the classroom teacher that he couldn't have any access to iPad. So now he's like not wanting to do any work, but he has no motivation to even, the token economy no longer has value. The work he's doing he has no reason to do anything.
Okay.
That's basically how she said. She's like, there's no reason for him to even just be at the school. Like he's sitting here for him in his mind. It's like, why am I here? I'm not getting anything out of this.
All right, good. So remember last week, I harped on you guys that we are going to be coming back to principles throughout this semester, right? Here's our first one. Without an EO or an MO, do you have effective consequences? No. And if you need to have a consequence to have learning, then do you need to have an MO to have learning? Yes. If you have to have consequences and MOs predict effective consequences, then MOs become a necessary component to learning. All right. Let's expand that. Well, let me ask this. Is that it? If I have an antecedent, a behavior, a consequence, and an MO, do I have a situation that is predictive of learning? Some hesitation. Emily's shaking her head vigorously. Not, yeah.
We're getting
Emily,
more
why?
predictive.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking it can be a predictor, or it wouldn't be in place.
So, and this is why this question is so important. And Cece, you've cheated a couple of times. You said it can be. All right. And I'm not qualifying the question that way. I'm saying it is predictive of learning. All right. If can is your answer, then that means cannot is available, which means the answer is no. All right. So what else is necessary to be predictive of learning? Let me give you, let's take a step back for a second and look at where we're heading right now. We've defined antecedent, we've defined identified behavior, we've identified consequence, we've identified MO. We are not yet at Learn Unit because we are not yet at a point where we can reliably predict learning.
Is it something to do with consistent behavior?
Okay.
Like they committed more than one time? Or no?
No, because because now we're talking about multiple learn units. When you're talking about multiple behaviors, you're talking about multiple learn units. So we're not even there yet. We're going to get there, but we're not there yet. Okay. Go ahead.
Have to do with like the SD, which I'm gotta go back and review because I'm confused about now.
So for our purposes, the antecedent is serving as the SD.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Well,
to me,
all right.
on the response end.
Heather, what were you going to say?
What about the environment, the controlling? You have to make sure all the variables within the environment are under control.
Okay, good. So under control, maybe not. The environment can't be competing. How many of you have loud children at your clinics? How many of you have kids that cannot learn while those loud children are being loud? All right, that's a setting event. That is a competing stimulus in the environment. What is it competing with?
Attention.
Behaviorally.
Competing with the other noise in the environment emitted by the other students, I guess.
So what is that other noise competing with within the Learn Unit?
The antecedent.
It's competing with the antecedent. Emily, you're talking, but you may be still muted.
Yeah, I realized that.
There we go. What were you saying?
The antecedent.
Yeah, it's competing with the antecedent. Maybe it's competing with the MO.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
All right. If I have a strong EO for this pretzel, but I have a stronger AO for whatever the hell that noise is, then that pretzel, I don't care. In this moment, I don't care about the pretzel. I care about that noise going away. Now my reinforcer is no longer effective. Okay? So setting events have to be taken into account. What else? Not even what else yet.
Instructional
Let me ask.
history.
Are we predictive of learning yet? Taylor, I talked over you on purpose. All right, so we are not yet predictive of learning. So Taylor, what else do we need to take into account?
Instructional history.
Instructional history. Okay.
Prerequisite skills.
Yeah,
Prerequisite
I'm
skills.
just like going through the decision log now
Yeah,
in my
that's what I was
head.
about to
Like
say.
that's
Good.
where I'm at. It's just
Good.
like, all right, we've
Exactly.
gone through these parts of the Learn Unit. What's next on the log? And I
That's
just keep going down.
exactly what you should be doing. Okay. Let me give you a scenario. You are sitting in a class. You guys, right now, transport yourself to another class. You have a teacher. You like that teacher. it's quiet, it's an appropriate environment for learning. That teacher says, I am going to teach you something. If you learn it, you will each earn $1 million. You have 1 day to learn this skill. You guys on board? You like that plan? Okay, you have 1 day to learn Chinese. You don't have the instructional history to allow for that. Now, obviously, that's an extreme, unrealistic example, but without the appropriate prerequisite skills, without the appropriate instructional history, you could have all those pieces in place and still not learn.
The instructional history can compete with what you're trying to target.
100%. Now, when it comes to learning, competing instructional history and missing instructional history are two different things. All right, they are both important, but we attack them differently. We deal with them differently. So that's good to know. Good to be important. Okay, so I have an appropriate instructional history. I have an appropriate set of motivating conditions. I have an appropriate learning environment. I have high quality antecedents. I have measurable behavior. I have stimuli that function as reinforcers and corrections. Do I have the necessary prerequisites to identify learning? Said more simply, are we done yet?
Are we including the cusp and capabilities of the child?
I would include that in the instructional history.
Okay.
You're cheating in a very good way. Good. Are we done yet? What about the child's physical history? What if we are asking the child to do something that they are not physically capable of doing?
The phylogen. I'm gonna butcher the word.
Yep.
Okay.
Phylogenetic history. Good. Or physical history. We have to make sure that there's a physical ability to learn the target operant. Are we done?
I don't
We're
want
close. We're close.
I mean, sensory, they talk about the sensory capabilities and the presence and absence of traumatic histories.
That goes into instructional history and physical history. At this point, we are very close to being predictive of learning. What we need, the last step, is ensuring that this learn unit in context that we just discussed is interacting with the teacher and their learn unit in context. If I have all of those things in place, and I have a teacher, and so Jessica, this is kind of what you were getting at. If I have a teacher who is not responsive to all of those factors, then I do not have learning. The learn unit is defined as multiple interlocking 3-4 term contingencies in context. That means I have antecedent behavior consequent relations being emitted by both teacher and learner in an environment in which the physical environment, the motivational environment, the instructional history, and the physical history of the child have all been taken into account. At this point, and only at this point, do I have the least divisible component of learning. If any of those pieces are missing, it's not to say, CC, that learning can't occur. It's to say that we cannot reliably predict that learning will occur. That is what separates the Learn Unit from a discrete trial. Now, how many of you sitting here today, an hour ago, thought you had delivered Learn Units? And how many of you still feel that way? And it's not that you haven't. It's that this intentional thought process behind all of the different components hasn't been there. Again, intentionally. It hasn't been a systematic part of your analysis of your instruction.
Mhm.
All right. When you understand the Learn Unit, when you're able to analyze the Learn Unit, when you're able to use the Learn Unit, everything else falls into place. Because no matter the tactic, no matter the cost, no matter the protocol, no matter the whatever, if you are using Learn Units, you will be doing something that is predictive of learning. If you take this concept of the Learn Unit, this tactic, you look at all the other tactics. All the other tactics, their role is to make some part of this Learn Unit more salient within the learning process. Increasing a schedule of reinforcement. That's impacting motivation and consequences. Response prompt is impacting antecedents. Moving to another room is impacting setting events. Increased opportunities to respond is addressing instructional history. This framework encompasses every single tactic. That is why we say that it is a natural fracture of learning. Without the Learn Unit, we cannot say that learning occurs. Basically, what a tactic is doing is that's you admitting that you didn't have Learn Units in place before, so I'm going to do something extra to super make sure that I have a Learn Unit in place. That's what you're doing when you put in a tactic. I didn't have a meaningful schedule of reinforcement, so therefore I didn't have a solid MO and reinforcer. So then did you have a Learn Unit before? No. Does that mean that you were doing something wrong? No. But what were you doing? Say it again, Cece.
Clearly, it's not a predictor of learning. So
It's not, at that point, it wasn't a predictor of learning, but it was useful. It was useful because hypothetically what you were doing, we're testing the behavior under the target conditions that you want to see the behavior under. I want to be able to ask this question with this level of reinforcement and get reliable responding. I want to be able to say, what's your name? Get Derek and say, nice to meet you, and have that be predictive of getting Derek in the future. If I don't, then no, it wasn't predictive of learning, but now I have my baseline of where I need to end up. So it's not to say that you're doing the wrong thing. It's not to say that you made a mistake. It's not to say that you wasted everyone's time. but you can't necessarily say that learn units were in place.
So if learn units aren't in place, would that be, but you have the antecedent behavior consequence relationship, would it be considered discrete trials?
I wouldn't, I don't know if you can jump from A to B like that. Discrete trial training does have very, specific definitions and guidelines. So like, let's say you are using a generalized antecedent, and that doesn't align with discrete trial training. So you may not have learn units, but you don't necessarily have discrete trials. All right. Okay. How are you guys feeling about that?
Better.
Like Yoda.
It's a lot, right? We think of the learn unit as this small little thing. We toss it around. We say, we delivered thousands upon thousands of learn units a day. No. Unfortunately, we deliver very few high quality learn units every day. As good as we are at what we do, many of our students still learn in spite of us. And that's I don't want to say a necessary evil of behavior analysis, but it is the challenge of what we do. Our goal is still to deliver as many high quality learn units per student per day as possible. All right. When you guys go back to Dr. Cohane's class tomorrow and you're having conversations about decisions and learn units to criterion and TPRAs and all these other components that are predicated on intact learn units, which is redundant because a learn unit that's not intact is not a learn unit, right? I want you guys to be thinking about how these things all work together. The relationship between learn units and learn units to criterion seems simple, right? You take the learn units, you divide by the number of objectives, and you have learn units to criterion.
That's where my next question, I didn't know if it'd be too far-fetched or not, but like when calculating learning units to criterion, if we had an STO and we're looking at the graph and it was clearly descending, so learning's not occurring, should that even be incorporated into that total? Because if learning wasn't occurring, the learning unit's not intact.
Good job, Taylor. Excellent job.
And I'm thinking of this because I do end of month data for our clinic. And I'm
Yes,
like,
you do.
Oh my God.
Right. So that is a conceptual question. All right. And part of the concept that needs to be teased apart there is, what is learning units to criterion a measure of? Don't answer it, because you don't know, because I don't know, because we don't know. There are multiple things. It can be a measure of learning. When learning units are in place with fidelity and objectives are chosen appropriately, then yes, it is a measure of long-term student learning. It's also a measure of effective teaching. That's why we take learning units to criterion for a teacher. If I am a teacher and I'm calculating that descending trend, and then I put in a tactic, and then I get an ascending trend, and then I take out the tactic and I get a descending trend, and then I put in another tactic and get an ascending trend, and then I take out the tactic and it stays there, right? Is it the kid's fault that it took me 1,000 learning units to get there? I put in the wrong tactic, right? That's my fault. So now learning units to criterion becomes a measure of my effectiveness as a teacher. Is that an important piece of data?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning units to criterion vis-a-vis the learn unit understands that this is a field, not just behavior analysis, but learning is a field that involves teacher expertise. Learning can only happen as fast as we can effectively teach. we put a ceiling on our students' behaviors. And I don't want to say it's a problem, but it is a challenge. That's why I struggle, well, not struggle, I am interested in more than just the one data point, right? We need to be able to see the whole picture. We need to be able to see lots of different components. We need to be able to see the inputs such that we can understand the output. All right, I'm going to stop there because I think everyone's mind is sufficiently blown. I love teaching this lesson. I love teaching this lesson. It really sets the framework for what, not just what we do the rest of the semester, but this is like the reset point. This is the go button for who we are as behavior analysts. Your ability, I think, your ability to understand and comprehend and internalize and utilize the concept of the Learn Unit will be predictive of your success as a behavior analyst. Now, I know that puts a lot of pressure on this lesson. This lesson is a starting point. It's actually it's a midpoint somewhere on your journey. I do not expect you to have you watch this, rewatch this a dozen times. I don't expect you to have all the answers to the Learn Unit. I still don't have all the answers to the Learn Unit. But this is what you need to be working towards, is a deep understanding of what it means to learn. That's what we're talking about. Whether or not you agree with every single checkbox on that Learn Unit egg, it's been reconceptualized. I got to get you guys that the new graphic, but that's not the point. The point is that, are you thinking about what are the critical variables to predicting learning? That's what we're interested in. That's what we're talking about. All right. Cool. I hope that was enjoyable for you guys. I love that conversation. I think it's a really, really beyond important and helpful. It's fundamental to what we do. So cool. Nice job, guys. I can't remember if there were any follow-up questions, but if you have anything that you need to, if you want to meet to start to discuss data collection ideas, shoot me an email. I'm here, I'm busy, but I'll make time. It's fine. We'll get there. All right. All right. Have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later.